Hey everyone, welcome back to Lawyers Mediators International Show and Podcast, lmipodcast.com, where we talk about the law and conflict resolution topics to educate both professionals and everyday people. Today I have special guest Bill Glover. Bill, how are you doing today?
Doing well, Matt. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, thank you so much for coming on. And
Mhm.
we're here to talk to you. You are a mediator. You are quite an enigma, actually, because you do a lot of different things in addition to mediation. And so I'll start off by sharing your website, which is very simple. It's just billglover.com. And just want to get to know you a little bit before we start talking about the topic of the day, which is going to be the Texas Mediator Field Study 2025 that you recently, successfully accomplished and that you'll be delivering soon in the spring. But first, before we talk about what mediators are thinking and how the Texas landscape is for mediators, people should know a few things about you. And they can head over to billglover.com and they'll see it. But let you, as I showcase your site, just share a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what you've done over the last, I guess, 3 decades.
Well, and this is not unusual for mediators. I found too, as I was doing these interviews.
Mhm.
Uh, Many of us come from different backgrounds, different careers, and have mediation as a second career. Fewer actually started as mediators in the first place. So for me, in my case, technologist, software engineer, many years working with Fortune 100s, consulting or startup type of work. Also a writer, both technical fiction and nonfiction, and a ghostwriter. I write for other people. I've done a lot of that, and so what the way this all came to be with the study is that I wanted to use those skills and give back to our local dispute resolution center here in the Panhandle of Texas. It's based in Amarillo, but it serves all top 26 counties.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to find the best way to apply my skills to do some good. And so the first thing, which I've learned from product development as a software engineer, was don't build something nobody needs.
Yep.
So started out by asking, just go out and ask people, what are the problems? What can we solve? And that grew, it sort of mushroomed and turned into this study. And so the idea was find out what I can help with and then do that help. And I'm a volunteer mediator with the local dispute resolution center. And also my wife, Jerry Glover, the coordinator for the dispute resolution center, is how I ended up being the volunteer. But
Oh,
we do a lot of things together. But and now she's recently made a change there. We could talk about that, but she's running for office right now. So
okay. Cool, cool. Well, definitely sounds interesting. But let's start off with the study. So I will
Mhm.
share my screen, and we have I guess, a couple of disclaimers you might have to give with regards to the study, because I noticed that it says it's a draft. Um, but go ahead, can you speak to that real quick?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm in the middle of the final process to wrap this up, and that was taking everything that I had heard from interviewing 58. It ended up being Texas mediators, and I pulled all that together, and then I gave it back out to the community, and I've had many people review it and give me feedback. So this isn't just a one and done process. There's been a lot of feedback to that. So I'll be incorporating that over the
Mhm.
next couple of weeks. And by the end of the year, I'll have it finalized, and then I'll be presenting it in the March with the Texas Association for Mediators Conference right about that time. So
Yes. Hopefully, I'll be able to attend that event. And I believe this year it's going to be in Austin, correct?
yes, and I did not set up. I won't actually be a presenter at the conference. I thought about doing that, but I
Yeah.
didn't want. This felt more something that maybe needed more discussion before I do anything like that. Maybe next year,
Yes.
after I've had more back and forth, and I'd rather present on the response to this than to present on this. I guess I don't
Got
want to be a person making all these claims about um, mediators in Texas without making sure that I'm recognizing all of the work that
Yeah.
TAM and TMCA and a bunch of people have been doing around these same issues that I uncovered.
Gotcha. Well, I'll say this. First off, thank you for the work you're doing. I was fortunate enough for to be invited by you to be one of the guests who were interviewed, and so I got to give my 2 cents about where I think things are and the day to day of my own office and how I handle work and what I see. So it were a lot of questions, and so we spent some time, together on video months ago. And for all the people, who devoted their time, to help you do this, applauds because this was a lot of work, and so thank you again for putting it all together. And so let's get to the heart of it. First
Sure.
off, what was the general purpose of the study? Why did you feel that you had to do this?
What started it was some things I was hearing. We do training as well in this DRC for new mediators. And some of the things that I was hearing from people who had both just completed the training or who were experienced mediators, have been around for years, there seemed to be some consensus that one of the hard parts was knowing what to do next after you've been trained.
Mhm.
There's definitely a role, and a very important role, for people volunteering with DRCs and taking other opportunities to get mentorship by co-mediating with experienced mediators and really learn. So that's great. But there's also, for those who do decide to go off and have a private practice, there's a disconnect there where it's not really clear how to set up a business, how to market that business, how to introduce yourself to the community and build thought leadership. So all of those things. I had a hunch that that was a problem from what I was
Mhm.
hearing, and I had to go validate that because I didn't want to guess. So
Yes. So, well, it makes sense. And so from what I saw, just from the rough, analysis, I saw something that stood out to me. And when you talk
sure,
about common challenges by career stage, you did divide this study up between new mediators who've only been doing this for a few years to experience 4 or more. And I'm curious, how you differentiated between an experienced versus a new mediators, because some experienced mediators who may have been doing this for over 5 years, for example, might not have a lot of business, and so they might not be, that well versed. What are your thoughts on that?
so that was yeah, there's when you look at a set of data like this and you look at results like this, there's so many different ways to slice and dice it, and making
Mhm.
that decision is always hard.
Yes.
And I saw a lot of different bifurcations. One was between, and we all have talked about this quite a bit, is the difference between those folks who are mediators and attorneys and those
Yes.
folks who are dispute resolution professionals first and foremost. And so there's a bifurcation there in experience and in the lived experience of people who are in those two camps. And then there's also a difference between those who only volunteer and those who have paid practices. So there's very different sort of perspectives there too. So all of those were possible ways to divide it.
Yeah.
What I ended up doing was dividing it by number of years because there was some correlation there.
Mhm.
People who were not getting a lot of mediations didn't stay in as much, it seemed like, at least in my group that
Yes.
I was going through. So the people who I talked to who had been doing it for years had done a lot of mediations. I think 1,500, I think, was a number one that I had. Somebody had
Wow.
been doing it since the 90s, and so there's a lot of possibly coincidental correlation between the number of years and the number of mediations here in this particular study. So
Gotcha. Okay, so let's talk about some of the takeaways. So, number one over here, when it comes to findings, the business gap, 70% of mediators cited, quote, no idea how to build a practice or set pricing as their top frustration post training. I'm curious why you think that's the case.
And this was interesting because I was hearing this same sentiment echoed, both in new mediators who were first experiencing it and then those who had solved the problem for themselves.
Mm,
But they talked about how when they started, they really had no idea. People had innovative ways of approaching it. One person did a survey for pricing from other mediators in their area
mhm.
and then decided where to base theirs in that. That's a nice scientific way to approach it.
Yeah.
Others just guessed. Some people. Some people looked at posted rates without really reaching out and talking to people, but just looked at what posted rates were like. So there were a few of those. I think there are definitely some modules or pieces in trainings now, especially as I've talked to people who have mediation trainings where they do talk about business to some extent, but it's a few hours on one day of a 40-hour training, and it's not really enough
Yes.
for people to really. And as a business owner myself, many years, owning businesses and building businesses, I know it takes a long time to get the mindset right, and that's half of more than half of it is all these mindset things that take time and back and forth. So I
Yeah.
understand where people are coming from, where that frustration. I empathize with that frustration, so I recognized it when I was hearing it. So,
Yes, yes. I think it's very similar to going to law school. They don't
oh,
teach you how to run a practice. That's just not something that happens. You learn a lot of legal theory. You might do a lot of mock trials and you prepare for court. You prepare to be an attorney to give advice. But when it comes to the mechanics of actually running an office, running the business, doing payroll, and basically hanging out your shingles, I think same thing here. Uh,
mhm,
when I went to mediation training, like you said, a few hours were spent on it, but you're just kind of told to figure it out, or you have to rely on other people, to help you along the way. So that's a pretty big, I think it confirms the hunch of many mediators.
mhm.
So let's go to number two, the mentorship disconnect. 80% interest in mentorship express interest in receiving or providing mentorship or supervision. So, what are some of your thoughts and takeaways when it comes to mentors and mentees?
This is something, and this is one of those that I wanted to make sure that it's clear. I recognize that a lot of people have worked on this exact issue and have tried to do some things around this. There are some the mentoring programs there. Tarrant County's got one. There's I know last TAM, I think Sonia Wood presented on the same topic about mentorship.
Mhm.
And so people have been working really hard on this. But the frustration that I was hearing, and so they expressed an interest, everybody was interested. But then the frustrations that I'm hearing from experienced mediators was, well, we're out here offering to mentor and nobody shows up.
Hmm.
Or from new mediators are like, well, I would love to be associated with a mentor, connected with a mentor, but I don't know where to go. Or I went a couple of times, but it's really unstructured and I got busy and I couldn't prioritize it. So I heard a couple of things. I heard nuances and something you raised there about the experience of new attorneys reminded me of this
Mhm.
that I heard just in the feedback last week, actually,
Yeah.
was that one of the things that's different about mediation from attorneys is there are a lot of law firms. So you'll have a large number of people of different levels of experience, and you could go and work with a firm and learn those things there.
Yeah.
There's very few mediation firms, or at least of any size, and most mediators are working in some amount of isolation. And so I think that was an interesting insight I heard just last week after, as part of the feedback on this.
Yep.
Another insight was that because, at least in Texas, mediation is, lightly regulated, very, very self regulating, I should say.
Yes.
Um, and the credentialing program is created by mediators for mediators. There's certain things that are involved in that included in that, like number of hours to be a credential mediator. You have to put in a certain number of hours, a number of mediations, but there's no mentoring requirements or co-mediation requirements. Think of it like apprenticeship requirements for the trades. There's nothing there that's required, so it makes it harder to prioritize it in your practice. If you're not required to do it, you have so many things. You have things you have to do. You'll do those first. And so I heard from multiple people during this process that there might be some interest in a more formal, at least expectation of some co-mediation or mentoring relationships. That was an interesting thing I didn't expect to hear. That was a little bit of a surprise.
Yeah. Well, that is interesting. I'm licensed as an attorney in Florida, and I'm certified by the Florida Supreme Court to do mediations as well. And I compare a lot, Texas and the way we do things here and the way they do things there. For example, Florida's young attorneys have the right or the access to more seasoned attorney mentors who can come and take them under their wings, and the state encourages that. There's a similar program for mediators with the ABA, for example.
Mhm.
Um, and in fact, this year actually, I went to the Dispute Resolution Conference, Spring Conference in April of 2025 in Chicago, and they paired me up with a mentor, and
Mhm.
it was um, great experience to be able to pick that person's brain. So there's always going to be that need, and but this study shows that there's an importance here that maybe we're not meeting. There's a need that's not being met, and the people are in need of it. Okay, the referral problem, word of mouth. This would be good. So how do people get business? Word of mouth dominance. 90% of mediators rely on word of mouth as a dominant source of new clients, but yet few describe systemizing it. Network advantage. Referrals skew heavily toward those with pre-existing legal or community networks. Yeah, this could be a whole topic by itself. Like, how
Oh, yeah.
do mediators get business? So, what are some thoughts you have on this?
Yeah, I've thought about this one a lot because of my particular background and skills. I think this is something where maybe I can help with.
Yes.
So I'm putting together some free materials around that maybe we can share out with
Mhm.
the DRCs and the organizations. But so referrals, yeah, people who are coming from an existing legal practice and maybe mediation is their second career or retirement career, they bring over their relationships and it makes it easier to find referrals that way. But that's not a reproducible thing for somebody else who's coming, just starting out. Or people who are coming from a professional background and maybe have all of their connections in business, again, networks are networks and they're powerful. Um, what what I did run into a few, and I said, few describe systematizing it, but some did. Um, really, the techniques aren't that different from any other business. That depends on referrals or depends on professional networking. And so I ran into several cases where people had good marketing plans put together that included social media content and building thought leadership stuff and then doing warm outreach and cold outreach and things like that. So all of these concepts that are very business and not very mediator
Yeah.
related, but I did find some people who were doing that successfully. And this was where it really another one of those bifurcations was there were people. Some of the mediators I talked to were like, well, you can't make a living doing mediation. Everybody knows that. And then there were people who were making a lot of money or a very good living doing mediation who were like,
Mhm.
well, of course you can. It's a business like anything else and you do it this way.
Yeah.
And so that information doesn't seem to be disseminating back and forth very well. And so um so that was an interesting finding is that was another one of those divisions of people who saw a way to do it and people who didn't, and they weren't really communicating with each other.
Interesting. So, do you think it's advisable that if a person wants to be a mediator, it's helpful for them to have some kind of background that might spill over? Like, I can imagine a lawyer wanting to become a full-time mediator using those connections, right? And
Mhm,
in order to get referrals from other attorneys who can then bring business to them. I think that's the model I know. But
mhm.
what about if somebody's a therapist or somebody who's, in ministry or somebody who's in
Oh,
the
absolutely.
hospital system? Like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Or another example, someone who's worked in construction for many years,
Okay.
knows quite a bit about construction disputes, or somebody who's
Right.
worked with real estate and landlords, tenants. So the thing that I think the non-obvious thing about doing networking like this is that it's important to narrow your focus. Narrow it, niche down. It's
Got it.
okay to change add to your niche later, but for when you're starting out, focus on one thing because then you know where to go and who to talk to and who to connect with. So, if you've been working as an attorney and already been working with mediators and you've been then you've already built some of that network by default. But let's say you're starting from scratch. The very first thing is to think about, say you're in ministry or in healthcare, who do I know and who has problems that could be resolved by mediation? As long as you keep that first and foremost in your mind, is that you're solving problems, then it makes it much easier to approach those people in a professional and comfortable way. That's the other thing. Don't try to turn into a salesman.
Yeah.
It's just not. It should be all this networking isn't about pushing your card into people's hands and begging them to refer you. Whatever. It's more just building real, human relationships and building trust and
Yes.
letting people know what you do and that you're good at it.
Yes. And so I'm going to share on my screen real quick an example niche. And I've done this
Mhm.
before with different trainings I've done. This is one of my brands. It's called childsupportmediation.com.
Yeah.
Because I used to work for the Attorney General Child Support Division for years, I did a lot of family law. I realized that there's a need to help people handle family law cases, specifically dealing with child support and child custody,
Mhm.
on um, in this specific area of law. And like you said, construction, or somebody who's dealt with real estate, disputes happen everywhere, okay, in every business segment and every industry. So if folks are out there and they want an idea, about what type of mediations they can handle, think about what you're good at. Think about what industry that you're already familiar with. Then you can just find the conflicts that happen and teach to it and speak to it and help people resolve their disputes because you already have some kind of knowledge base from that industry. And I think
Mhm.
people forget that they just go out and think they're just going to do all kinds of mediations no matter what. That's going to dilute you. You have to, I absolutely agree with you, you have to niche, you have to get really really good at something that's very specific.
Mhm. Absolutely. And there's a misperception in a lot of businesses, but also
Mhm.
especially in therapists, mediators, people who have a certain very limited resource of their own time that they need to allocate to the work that they do,
Yeah.
attorneys, is that you really don't need that many clients in a year. If you have 250 mediations in a year, you filled up all your available slots except your weekends,
Yeah.
and with little time for vacation. Um, so it's really a small. You're focused on a small number of people and a small number of yeses to make a thriving business. So
Gotcha. Gotcha. All right. So isolation spiral. This one stood out to me. I was thinking, boy, am I lonely? In this field, does that happen? Said two-thirds of respondents described feeling professionally isolated. What are your thoughts on this? Because I don't think it's the same as attorneys. My opinion, but why?
I think yeah, I think there is a real difference, and it's not the same as corporate work or other things where there's a sort of a little village, a little community of people that you're seeing every day and working with. And all of those things. An attorney's a little bit different. You've got the courts, you've got all of the legal professionals that are around the law that you're interacting with every day, clerks and all sorts of people. Mediators have a sort of a quieter existence in some ways. There's the calls for people saying, I want to book a mediation or, asking questions about mediation, whatever. So you have those calls coming in through the day. And then you have the sessions where you're actually, resolving a dispute and you've got the mediations there. But what you're not doing, there's not a whole office of people that you're interacting with through the day and doing things. Unless now you maybe say you're at City of Austin or with the state with the case of the PRPC up here, with the Dispute Resolution Center, it's actually in the building with the Panhandle Regional Planning Commission. So there's another governmental or government adjacent type of agency right there. So
Mm.
you do get some interaction that way, but it's a very It can be a very isolating, and for professional mediators that very much tend to be solo practitioners.
Hmm.
And now it's post-COVID. Everything's remote.
Yeah,
The whole world has gone much more remote. There's more isolation in general from that.
correct.
But yeah, you could definitely have an entire practice where you don't see a human being other than on a video screen
Mm.
in a week, and still have a thriving mediation practice, but be very isolated.
Yep. Yeah. Very
Those,
good
those are the
point.
things I'm hearing. I'm sort of merging a bunch of stories together in one,
Yeah.
but that's yeah.
Well, you're a good person to speak to because you've heard it all, and
Mhm.
I think mediators, in our nature, we know we thrive to be neutral. We
Mhm.
try to show people that we are not biased. We're not on anybody's side. Our goal is to just help the parties, reach their agreement. And I think it's a little bit like being a judge because I've heard from judges, they say that sometimes it's a very isolating job. It's a very lonely job because you never want to seem improper, with one side. You could have friends or whatever, but even on social media, it's just that kind of work makes you try to go down a very, middle road so that you're not picking sides. And I think for mediators, you're always trying to show that you are not on anybody's side. So if it just happened the other day, somebody called my office wanting me to help them as an attorney, and my assistant had to turn him away, but like, hey, Mac was your mediator, so he can't assist. So just one small little example, right? But
Yeah.
there's that constant, like, I gotta stay away from others. It's just built into the job when you
Mhm.
are neutral. You know, um, I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that, and also, do you think that a lot of neutrals, people who do this kind of work, tend to maybe hold back and not be as loud. What I mean by that is
Mhm.
I had a debate once with a mediator who was commenting on whether or not it's proper for a person who holds himself out as a mediator to go out on social media and just talk politics, basically just say a lot of
Mhm.
things, and whether or not that's not going to isolate or alienate people from them. That was our debate, and I think to a degree maybe because as a mediator you're always wanting to not alienate. You're always wanting to for people for both sides to come to you. So I wonder if that has anything to do with it. If a person is, you know, a neutral, if it's just part of the business that you're going to be alone, just part of the business. What are your thoughts?
I think there's definitely an element of that. This not coming from the interviews here, but just thinking my own experience as a
Yeah.
mediator. You will run into people who you have all sorts of of connection. Oh, not I'll not say connection, but you have all sorts of things in common. And normally you would want to, if somebody who, if you ran into them in another business context, you'd be like, oh, yeah, we should go have lunch sometime and chat a little bit and talk about the industry and do these things. And, you absolutely can't do that as a mediator. And you have to just, you know, uh, you have to stay neutral. You have to, and so you feel it in that, and so like, oh, there's a missed opportunity to make a friend.
Hmm.
And even after the mediation, if you run into that same person,
You
and
can
in a
talk about certain
supermarket,
things. Yeah.
yeah, you're gonna have this definite barrier there that you don't want to cross, and that
Exactly.
adds another little bit of friction to making friends or
Yeah.
making connections. Um, I
Yeah.
think that's real.
Yeah. I don't think people realize that. I think it's a very personal thing that we mediators and neutrals kind of live with. And, I've seen a party who I mediated for, out in public. Well,
Mhm.
I might engage them. Oh, good to see you again. But that's it. Like you can't,
Mhm.
what if you're seen by somebody else, the other side? Oh my goodness, that's my mediator. They're on
Yeah.
the other side.
Always in the back of your mind. It's like, I don't want to give
Exactly.
a wrong impression. And you
Exactly.
can't just reminisce and say, oh, you remember when you said you can't do any of
Exactly.
that.
Yeah.
That's not
Confidentiality is
confidential.
confidential. Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. The emotional toll Many mediators handle repeated exposure to anger, grief, and loss. Several describe stress and a desire for a practice similar to that for therapists receiving therapy, where practitioners have someone to help them work through these challenges. And I do concur, especially in family
Mhm.
mediations, because I think family mediations is by far one of the biggest areas where people go to mediation. And just like, therapists and counseling work family disputes and family conflict, sibling rivalries, co-parenting disputes, all these kind of um, disputes fall on the shoulders of family mediators. And so, what
Mm.
were your takeaways when you heard from a lot of these mediators that talked about the emotional tolls?
This was interesting. Yeah, because people would tell these stories of these, really harrowing stories sometimes. And one thing I'll say about mediators in general that I saw across the board is very much a resilient people. People had definitely had coping strategies. They seem to, maybe the neutrality helps a little bit in this because we're constantly
Yeah.
reminding ourselves,
Yep.
but I'm not sure. But I did see an awful lot of resilience. But some of the mediators I talked to actually were also therapists or
Mm-hmm.
or other healthcare professions on the side,
Mm-hmm.
or I shouldn't say on the side, but in a previous career or at the
Yep.
same time. And they had experience with these sort of practices in other professions, and mentioned that they missed it for mediation because it was so helpful for them. And that was an eye opener for me because I hadn't
Mm-hmm.
really considered that before. Just kind of a debrief with somebody who, and there's all sorts of barriers to this because we haven't formalized. It's not something that exists in a formal way. Because like if a therapist goes and talks to another therapist, there's some confidentiality that's retained there, and they
Yeah.
can open up a little bit. With mediation, we would have to figure out how that's supposed to work. But because if you can't talk about specifics, it may not be as effective. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Or maybe not. Maybe you don't need to. Maybe you just need to talk about your own feelings. But definitely didn't see that. People were not currently doing that very much, and definitely had people mentioning how if they were experienced with it, they missed it, or that there should be something like that available. Some of the stories. I mean, you've been in mediation for a long time. You've
Mm.
been in family, so you know. And with the DRC up here, we do a lot of child protective services mediations. We do a
Yes.
lot of
Yes.
family. Those can be really painful,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
beyond the issues within the mediation, there's also the related things around it because there's such high emotion. Physical threats to your safety are not uncommon in family law.
Mhm.
Concerns at least that something might happen, and so going through that concern and then coming back down, okay, things are okay now, but being able to relax again after seeing that everything's okay. People described those experiences. And this goes back to the isolation as well. So
Mhm.
imagine working as a solo, and this is most people listening to this may not have to imagine this, but imagine working as a solo mediator in your own office. You decide to do an in person mediation, it's a family law thing, and it's only you there and the parties.
Yep.
That's a real concern if you think it might be, some sort of safety issue.
Mhm.
And so I talked to people who were definitely doing all their family mediation was only remote now. And they wouldn't do it in person because they didn't have the sense of safety
Yeah.
there. So,
Yeah. Family violence comes up. We've talked about that on this channel multiple times over
mhm,
the years, and the danger. And this is why we let people know when there's child abuse or elder abuse. We have a duty to report. When these kind of things
yes.
happen. But those kind of disclaimers and reminders of people never come up in the other areas of mediation. It's always
Mhm,
family. Family is where the drama happens, and it's humans, right? Humans, we need each other, but we have conflict, and it's in philosophy, it's the hedgehog's dilemma. You get too close to get warmth, but then you prick each other, and then we got to distance ourselves, and then that dance keeps happening. It never stops in nature, and it happens the same way with humans. And so it then takes a toll on the neutral, on the mediator. So whenever I
Mhm.
say that mediators are like judges, we just don't get to decide, but much the same way, we take on the information given by both sides, and we're trying to, distill it. We're trying to, we're not trying to pass judgment. We're simply trying to help people resolve their disputes. But boy, oh boy, folks can send some poison your way, and I say poison
Yeah.
not to impute anybody's storyline or personal life story of what they've gone through, but mediators will always let people know that vitriol can come our way, and
Yes.
we're human beings, right? that
Mhm.
that that can definitely impact us as well, but a good mediator is going to handle it, and their goal,
Mhm.
the number one goal, is to help the two people, the parties in front of them, to reach some kind of agreement, some kind of settlement that the people can live with, and
Yeah.
doing God's work.
Well, and
So
regardless of the field of mediation, I mean, the particular area of mediation, we all run into that stage where everybody has to vent,
yeah,
and that's where the words come out sometimes, and you've got
exactly.
to not, you know, got to you've got to control the process, keep the process moving forward, but you can't really react as with your first response to hearing those sorts of things. You've got to.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
I mean,
hard.
that'll break trust, and once the parties don't trust you as a mediator, forget it. It's over.
Yeah.
So our goal is to just help, and it just unfortunately comes with a lot of toxicity sometimes. But you do it enough, you learn the patterns of what you do. So you have some insights about demographics and some patterns, but let me get to the recommendations, because
Mhm.
based on everything that you saw and you came away from, what are some of your recommendations? I see you got 5 points here. Number one, bridge training to practice. Add business outreach and practice setup modules to 40-hour training and continuing education where it's not already offered. So this is really important, right? The whole business angle. You want to help
Mhm.
people succeed before they get out there and hang up their shingle. You want them to have the skills necessary to actually manage a business.
Mhm. And this came up. One of the things that I heard in this was that it's not people don't get into mediation because they want to become rich.
Mm,
People get into mediation because they want to help people and they want to provide
yeah,
an important service. Often have a very strong drive to do something good for their community, the community that they see themselves as a part of, or that either regionally or whatever. And so this is an issue more of sustainability. So
hmm,
being able to do this year after year and not have to, have a side job or not
right.
have to fund your mediation habit. Uh,
Understood. Yes. And so we don't all have MBAs, and we don't,
mhm,
you know, all have business backgrounds, but we have to know the basics when it comes to marketing, managing your business, running it, and not have it, die on you. So, number two, mentorship and peer cohorts. Establish structured statewide mentor pairings and peer supervision groups. So, how important is it, that we as a state, as a community of mediators, come together to try to set up some kind of mentorship system?
and this has been, attempted in regional, um, approaches and within affinity groups of one sort or another. People have tried to do this, and as you mentioned, it already exists in some states and with
Yeah.
the ABA. Um, so it's possible to do this, and I think now that we're more online, now that we're more virtual, it may be even maybe a little easier because you don't have to be geographically close to be someone's
Correct.
mentor. Um, so that's something I think is really worth exploring and making, and maybe even putting some this. But when I wrote this was before getting this feedback
Mhm.
about maybe making it mandatory, or at
Right.
least very much expected. So I think this has maybe even become a little bit stronger recommendation that maybe we consider ways to really incentivize this so that
Yep.
people will seek it out and take advantage of it. Maybe even
Yep.
track how much of it they've taken advantage of. This went so far as one person was recommending that they have some sort of sign off process from a mentor. And, you could get another mentor if it's not working out with this mentor, but some experienced mediator would have to sign off and say, you're ready to go solo. So I think that's kind of the extreme, that's going all the way to, a work requirement here for being a mediator.
Yes.
But I did hear that sentiment.
Yes. Well, in Florida, for example, to be a Supreme Court of Florida certified mediator, you have to have 16 CLE
Mhm.
every couple years, and you have to report them to the state to keep your certification active. And
Mhm.
technically speaking, you could be a mediator without being a Supreme Court certified one, but that means you can't get referrals or do one for court. So by default, everyone ends up, getting the certificate. But that requirement of doing CLEs is big. In Texas, we don't have that. Once you become a mediator, then you can become a really, really good mediator, very seasoned with lots of, you know, experience under your belt, and you can help a lot of people, thousands of people. But technically, there's not any kind of state mandated reporting system like for lawyers, for example, to keep licenses. Um, in Florida, one of the ways that you can um, keep your certification is to do co-mediations. And
Mm.
so, because you can have, especially when you're doing your trainings from the very beginning, you can do co-mediations alongside more seasoned mediators. Again, in Texas, none of that. So I wonder if co-mediation, not necessarily making it required, but if that might be an avenue that the state could look to so that we treat it more like not an internship, but um, that I forget that word when um, a professional, an
Apprenticeship.
apprenticeship, exactly,
Yeah.
an apprenticeship.
Yeah,
When a
that word came up.
professional,
Yeah.
yeah. So tell me, what were some of the thoughts about apprenticeship ideas
Yeah.
for mediators?
Well, one thing I wanna recognize is that there's a strong sentiment, among some in Texas that I would say, no, I don't wanna that minimizes it in a way that I don't intend to, so I won't say it that way.
Mm.
I'll say that there's a difference of opinion in different groups, but there's, generally a strong sentiment that mediators should try to continue to be self-regulating, and if we do a good enough job of that, then the state will not want to regulate mediation and will allow it to continue to be self-regulating.
Yeah.
So one of the middle steps in there is that because credentialing is voluntary in Texas, but maybe the credentialing could require those things without needing the state to step in to do that. So that's something that mediators ourselves could say, we're going to require this and it's going to make it part of our credentialing. And if you're going to be able to claim that credentialing, you'll have to have this amount of CLE and you'll have to have, there are already some hour requirements for mediation requirements for credentialing. And the training actually can service some number of those hours. So there's already a tendency toward that. What we haven't done is, and there's a mention of how much can be observation or co-mediation, but I think it was more of a limit rather than a requirement in the current credentialing. So those are things we could talk about as, a requirement for a certain amount of mentorship and that as part of self-regulated credentialing. That model then, if we were comfortable with it, if the state wanted to adopt it and mandate it, then we might be more, that might be less disruptive, if we've shown something that works first.
Mm.
Um, because I am afraid if we don't, and we do run into some concerns about this down the road, that the state will act. And the first thing they'll do is look at other states and adopt what they've
Yep.
done. And if we don't have an existing system in place that we can present, we don't have anything to counter with.
Yeah, that was my thoughts, and like first off, if something's not broken, why fix it? And
Mhm.
if we if the only reason we'd be doing this is because well, Florida's doing it or another state's doing it, then that's one reason why. But that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be done. And I am a big believer in the marketplace. Like, look,
Right.
the market could very well take care of mediators, whether they rise or fall. right? Based on what the public wants, but I don't know if the public are ever going to know what a quote unquote good mediator is versus a bad one, or one who's overworked versus one who's underworked. I don't know. And finally, last thing I'll say is, I'm sorry. One last thing is the credentialing. I wonder if the way we're doing it is going to create conflicting credentialing associations, because if we can just self-associate and create our own little credentialing groups, what stops there from cropping up a whole bunch of them? It hasn't happened, but I wonder.
There's a risk there. Yeah. I mean, I've seen enough municipal politics to see those sorts of things actually happen at the municipal level for other things,
Yeah.
where there'll be a group that's like a neighborhood association, and another neighborhood association pops up with the exact same name, just slightly different, and now they're in conflict with each other. So I've seen those things at the micro level.
Yeah.
I could definitely imagine that at a more macro level, at the state level. So we're fortunate it hasn't happened yet. I think one of the things that's helped us a little bit is mediation attracts generally pretty reasonable people, and that's helped a lot.
No, I agree. We don't get into this like you're saying to get rich. We get into it because we're genuine. Most mediators I know are sincere and they're genuine. And
Yes.
although I would say most probably will not want to be bothered with having to now go pay for new MCLE classes and new certificates because, hey, we've liked this. We're in
Yeah,
Texas.
people are people.
Exactly. We get your certificate and you can just go do your thing. Right. And
Mhm,
it's between you and the public in the market. And that's how we have it right now,
mhm.
and so your work is insightful to help us determine whether or not we should change it or and how. So we're getting close to time, so let's wrap a few of these up. So other recommendations you have, referral development systems provide templates and guidance for content and organic marketing, presence, case studies, and referral pipelines. So this is all about helping mediators get business, right? Because let's face it,
Mhm,
that is the bread and butter. Like this is how mediators make use of their time and this
mhm.
profession that they've entered into voluntarily. If you're not getting business, what's the point? Right.
Yeah, and part of the recommendation here is that by doing it in a consistent way, we can socialize that this is okay, this is the way it's done,
Yep.
and that will help everybody. So
Yes. Okay. Professional community infrastructure. Build regional mediator associations with regular networking, share templates, and ongoing mentorship complementary to statewide offerings. So go ahead, speak on it. What are your thoughts?
yeah, and that complementary is carrying a lot of weight right there. So this is not to replace and not to cause that problem we were just talking about.
Yeah.
The idea is to maybe address some of this isolation, address some of the these build on each other. So this is a
Yep.
way to maybe help with some of these other recommendations at the same time. But just getting mediators together so they know each other. We already have some of these. Again, Tarrant County has some things. There's
Yep.
different groups around the DRCs. Each one has a little community around it. But making these a little bit more inclusive of private mediators and more more structured. So I
Yep.
think that could be really valuable.
Exactly. And so we know a lot about these organizations, right? Like there's
Mhm.
Association of Conflict Resolution Houston, for example,
Yeah.
ACR. There are lots of different. I recently spoke at the Tarrant County Mediators Association. Um,
Mhm.
there's, but I think the frequency of meeting
Mhm.
kind of impacts things. If you're at the state level and you're doing TAM, Texas Association of Mediators, you meet once a year.
Mhm.
It's a big to do. It's a big affair. It's, a couple days. You get to meet people from all around the state, great speakers, great lecturers, and been to a lot of them. But you go home and you don't see you don't see them again, for some time, unless and until you decide to return. So your idea is to have more localized, regular, frequent meetings, um, and unless we build something regionally, region by region, I'm afraid that it wouldn't just pop up organically,
Right.
unless uh, unless uh, uh, just to give a Florida example again. because of the MCLE requirement where you have to fulfill a certain number of hours, there are mediator trainers who, in addition to their regular mediation training that they do for new mediators, and to help you reach your biannual status of requirement for hours, they'll also do like a weekly, every Saturday morning meetup where anybody's invited for free to
Mhm.
get their hours. That way, that mediator trainer gets to, build up their name recognition. You're only doing it once a week, maybe once a month, even. And the people who show up, the mediators, are then getting certificates for each one. And by the time you get to your 24-month renewal, you've had a whole lot of hours already accrued. And it helps with
That's a
the
great idea.
yeah,
Yeah.
it helps with the, community, like, you are not isolated, you get to connect with people, and so I'll put a shout out there for Ty Bodoni. Ty is a mediator trainer in Florida who's based in, I think, Orlando, and so he does this almost every single Saturday morning for mediators to come from around the world, and he does it on Zoom, and it's an awesome way to help people stay connected and to get to meet with like-minded mediators, and you get to bounce questions and share your highlights of the week and share your, what didn't work, and it's I've been to a bunch of them, and they're great ways to stay in the know. So I thought about him and how he and other mediators do those weekly, catch ups when I was reading through this, and it's something we don't have in this state.
Mhm. And at least getting it started sounds like it would be pretty low lift. Need someone dedicated to keeping it going, and that's the
Exactly.
hard part.
Yeah, and I think because of the MCMLD requirement, there's a built-in incentive for the mediator trainers to keep it going. Because the state Supreme Court has a captive audience and all the mediators who have to pay for those classes when the time comes.
Mhm.
So but in our state, in Texas, we do not have a MCLE requirement. You do not have to ever take a class again if you don't want to, which, you know, produces some of the issues that we have.
Yeah.
So it's a dilemma that we have to find a balance for. Again, I'm not saying people are going to be happy with hearing this. Like, are you saying we got to start paying for classes now? It's like, well, there are some benefits. Just being honest. All right.
Yeah.
Last one. Wellness integration. Normalize reflective practice, constructive peer check ins, and therapy or counseling as part of a continuing education. So, yeah, give me some thoughts. Why do you think it's very important for us to address the wellness concerns for mediators?
We talked a little bit about, some of the reasons the mediators are exposed to and involved in, some pretty heavy things.
Mhm.
And to be resilient and to sustain that practice and keep going, it would be good to have a little bit of training on self care and how to keep going. And I'll say one of the things because I want to give voice to different things I heard. So I did
Yes.
hear this. I also did hear some pretty stiff upper lip, well, that's just the way it is, and I don't need any help, and I'm good. So I did hear that, and I want to recognize that some people feel like this might be just a little too much,
Yeah.
but there's a recognized benefit to this in other professions, and I think it would be helpful here too. A little bit of training around it, some formalization of how it's done. We need to solve some problems around confidentiality that are not solved,
Mhm.
and figure out how to support each other or how to at least encourage support um, for mediators and their emotional and mental health, and make them better mediators and more effective for the disputants. So
Yep. And that helps those disputants, that helps the parties at the end of the day. If
mhm.
your mediator is healthy, um, your case will probably be as well with them. So, well, Bill Glover, this was a very insightful conversation. We talked about a lot, and you did a lot of work, for this. And so, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, for coming on the LMI podcast to discuss some of the takeaways. And
Well, I'll say we all did a lot of work. I
Yeah.
gathered it, but I was really thrilled to see how supportive and how helpful, just everyone I reached out to was. That everybody participated in this. So,
Yes, yes. We all had a lot to say. So thank you again for reaching out to me. And
mhm,
I did see some interest, take some interest in the stats that you had put out there. But the people you spoke to, um, most of them are urban, probably they live in cities, not rural.
mhm,
Um, a lot of them volunteer.
mhm.
And
There was some representation of rural, as you can see from the numbers, but yeah,
yes,
majority were urban. Yeah.
okay. And the median
And this
experience
was,
is,
I will say, I should say something about this.
please.
The group that the pool that I'm pulling from here, because this was heavily weighted toward people who were members of TMCA or TAM.
Mhm, mhm,
There's definitely that you're definitely going to see that skewing some of these numbers. So I don't want to overstate
mhm.
the how scientific this
Yeah,
process was. This was not a you know UT or Tech or
mhm,
somebody, maybe they could do something here.
yeah,
University of Houston, they do a lot actually. So
yep,
maybe they'll do a more scientific study someday.
yeah,
This was qualitative more than quantitative. I was looking for the messages that resonated with people, the things they needed to share, not so much the numbers. But I thought the
understood.
numbers were interesting enough to share here.
No,
So,
definitely. And this at least opened the door, for further research and further study. And I think most mediators would definitely be interested, to hear what their colleagues have to say, and I know it took time, doing any kind of, research or survey. People sometimes don't even want to respond, right? You send somebody a survey, they're like, I don't have time. But to take time and actually talk to you, and this was when we met, it was on, I think, a Zoom call or Google Meet
mhm.
call. And we spoke for a good at least half an hour. That takes time, and 58 of it, that's a lot of time. So I appreciate. That's why I'm saying I appreciate that. It's not a small feat. So definitely. All right. If people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way they can follow up with you?
Easiest way to reach me, if you know my name, you know my email address. So it's bill@billglover.com. And you can always go to billglover.com and contact me there. So,
Awesome. And you, of course, have your LinkedIn, and that's where you are big on social media, right? LinkedIn,
mhm.
Bill Glover.
Yeah, I focus on LinkedIn because it's a professional social media platform. I'm not a real Facebook, TikTok sort of guy. I don't dance very well. Um, I enjoy it, but I don't do it very well.
Yes, yes. Well, talking about, referrals and social media, this is the future, man. You gotta anyway, this video is gonna go on TikTok, so there you go.
That's
Alright.
right. I finally have made it. Yeah, I have no moves to share though. So,
Alright. Well, Bill, thank you so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate this, and so, get the conversation going, and, if and when, we do connect at TAM in 2026, that would be, awesome to meet you in person finally.
yeah, it'd be
Alright.
great to see you.
All right, everyone, check out this video and all the others on lmipodcast.com and on the YouTube channel, LMI Podcast, Lawyers, Mediators International. All right, take care. Bye bye.
Take care.